everybody. Welcome to another episode for Ontario Landlords here with our Landlord Series podcast. Kevin Breitner, host, alongside a good friend, colleague, Stonegate Legal Services, Paralegal extraordinaire, Mr. Robert Lisi. And we're here to talk to you today about occupants, tenants, guests, the difference between them, how the rules and regulations work. People can be added to leases, anyways, we're going to get into it all. So let's bring in Mr. Rob to start off with what is the defined difference between them and how does that look at?
So when we get into occupants, roommates, or guests, I guess for the landlord, it doesn't matter what they are because they're not tenants. So when you sign a lease, the person that signs the lease is the tenant. Now, in the Ontario standard lease, there is a section for occupants. And what that is saying is who else is going to be occupying the property. So an example would that be is if I'm living in there with my wife and kids. Kids are not of the majority of age or the legal age, so they would be occupants. However, me and my wife would be tenants. What they need to know, what people need to know, is occupants can change without permission of the landlord. So I want you to know that tenants can have guests for any length of time. They can have occupants for any length of time. They can have roommates for any length of time without the permission of the landlord. What the landlord needs to be concerned about, which is the most important thing, is you never, ever accept rent or take rent from anyone other than your tenant. Because if you do, you don't want to be in a position where they claim that they are tenants. So it's very, very, very clear that you must only accept rent from your tenant. Now, I know you're going to get into this, so I'm going to jump in if you don't mind, that tenants are responsible for the damage caused by their guests. So if an occupant or a roommate does do damage, it is the responsibility of the tenants. The tenant may also be responsible if their guests commit illegal acts. Okay. Landlords may give a guest a trespass notice if they interfere with other tenants or the landlord. And tenants may face legal consequences if their guests cause substantial interference. So, in regards to occupants, guests, or roommates, the question that I get asked all the time is that if I rent out a 3-bedroom house to a couple and they want to bring people in, do they have to notify the landlord? The answer is no. They don't have to do that. All right. Do you want to expand on any more questions that I can answer, Kevin?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great start there, and you hit the nail on the head, right? The difference is the tenants are still responsible to everything for what their guests, roommates, or occupants that they're living with. With us, the way we always work things with our leases is we want to know who's all living in the house, whether they're occupants, tenants, kids. Not that we ever want this to happen, but if there was a fire and everything burned down, we would have to know who was inside. Pets, everything. I want to know. I know I can't stop them from adding in people, but we
Yeah.
always want to know, one, for just knowledge, and at the end of the day, in case we ever did need anything, we want to know who's in the home.
Okay, but keep in mind they don't have to give you ID. Just remember that because
Okay,
they're guests.
I've never asked for ID. It was just been we've just bodies, right? Well, boyfriend moved in. His name is Jim. Okay, great.
Okay.
Um, I had
Yeah, that's fair.
we had one instance here, and I know the answer already because we've dealt with this, but we'll share with everybody. We had a duplex where the upstairs tenants were a couple. The downstairs new tenant coming in was a single gentleman who was coming in with one child, and they decided that before we put it on rent, and if it was one person, they would split the utilities, 60% upstairs, 40% downstairs, and that's how they were going to go. Fast forward. The gentleman moved in his mother and 2 other of his kids a couple months later.
Yep.
Life changed for the gentleman, and they all came to live there. They had the space to do so. The utilities bill now, the upstairs tenants thought this is not fair. Now they're definitely using more water than us. They're here all day. We go to work. What is the situation there? How do we do it? Can the landlord do anything for anything at all? And what about the tenants upstairs?
No, so that's the thing is that if you're on a percentage, it's on percentage, no matter how many people that live there. When you rent out a unit, you're renting out the unit, not how many occupants are there. So I'm going to pick on my wife because she's a female. I find that women take longer showers, more showers. So if you have female, and this is just generalizing, yeah, the water's going to go up because more usage. But if it's on a percentage of 60/40, whatever it is, no matter how much that bill is, it's still going to be 60/40. Moreover, I'll just touch on something else. The only time that a landlord should be worried or concerned of how many people are in the property is if it goes against the bylaw. So, an argument would be like a one bedroom condominium. You can't put 5 people in a one bedroom condominium. That goes against the bylaw. So now you can file in accordance to that bylaw, or you can call the bylaw officers. But if it's a one bedroom condo and I get a girlfriend and I want her to live with me, I do not need to inform the landlord at all.
And you would honestly say that it doesn't matter to the landlord either, like not even just no.
No. Well, what's the prejudice to the landlord if they're getting paid rent?
Yeah,
Now the argument I guess can be is that there's more wear and tear, but here's the thing: is that look, Kevin, if I lived in a one bedroom condo and you came to visit me, you're a guest. You're coming over. We're going to watch the game. You leave. The next day, another friend comes over. So what's the prejudice here to the
yeah,
landlord?
no, yeah, yeah. I just
Unless we party hard and then we break the rules and we create damage and problems. Other than that, the landlord should really just be concerned: is the rent being paid? Is it being paid on time? And is the noise at a minimal so that it doesn't interfere with anyone else?
that's one thing, right? You can't interfere with other, not guests, but tenants in the same building, whether it's
That's correct.
when it's multifamily.
That's
Uh,
correct.
okay, that's interesting because yeah, we've always just wanted to know. Again, I know we can't change anything or tell them no, but I've always just asked to get the name or somebody when they did move in, a girlfriend or a new roommate or somebody like that when they were staying for a longer period than just a night or something. Like I never came, like, but if someone was now living at the property, I've always asked just to know who it is, and I've never acquired ID or done anything, but I've always just wanted to know. Just anyways, okay.
Yeah, but that remember that can change, right? That can change anytime because, like I made the joke of if I had a girlfriend, well, if I get a new girlfriend, I guess I'm gonna have to. What you want is for me to let you know, hey, Kevin, just letting you know, uh, Josie left. Now Lisa's here, and again, I don't have to do that.
Yeah. No, no, fair enough. You're right. Like we say all the time, as long as rent's being paid and everything's going okay and there's no complaints, that's what they want. They want to just have their home to themselves, right? Just like
Okay. The main thing that I want everyone to understand is that a tenant can have guests or occupants without the landlord's permission. Because I get a lot of landlords that tell me they brought in a boyfriend, they brought in a girlfriend without my permission. They don't need your permission.
yeah, no,
Okay.
I definitely knew that, but I've always wanted to know just names for bodies of who was in there.
All right. May I go off on something else? Do you mind?
No, please.
Okay. Here's another thing that people need to know about occupants. Let's say you have 2 people on a lease. That's called a joint tenancy, correct?
Yeah,
Okay. Let's say that 2 people are a couple and they break up. So one person, let's say the female says, I'm going to be leaving. Kevin, here's my notice. I'm no longer going to be a part of the lease. That lease now continues with the other tenant. So that other tenant is now 100% liable for the rent. But if he gets a new girlfriend or someone to live with him, that would be considered a roommate, occupant, or guest. It's not part of the lease. So a lot of times people ask me, do I have to add that person onto the lease? Well, you can, but you don't have to because they are just part of being living there. They're not part of the lease. And again, that girlfriend could change. So why add them to the lease? Now, the only reason why I hear landlords want to add them to the lease is because they want to raise the rent. And you can't do that.
with roommates and stuff like that, Rob. Let's talk a little bit about student housing. Um,
Okay.
okay, now this is definitely
I know where you're going to go with this.
yeah, it's an interesting strategy for investors. There's a little money to be made. They divide up rooms, right, and they rent out room by room by room. and they go through it that way. Some say it's the most profitable to rent out, right? Because you're getting the maximized return because you're dividing up the area, and students are paying up to $600-700 a room right now, and Wi-Fi is unlimited, right? To give it to them all, that's all they really need.
Mhm.
But how would you set up a student housing properly if you had, let's call it, 5 rooms, 5 students, and student
Okay.
Mary says, I have me and 4 girls that want to come live and rent your house. What's the best way
Right.
for a landlord to do that?
So I got to be careful here because I don't want to give legal advice on how to do it, but because I get these calls, and what you need to be concerned about is where it is, because there are some areas, and I'm not going to mention the names of the districts, but the way that I would do it is I wouldn't put them on one lease. I would put them on individual leases. And the reason being for that is if you have 5 people on a lease, and let's say it's a university or college program of 3 years, some are 3 years, some are 2 years, some are 4 years, some stay longer, some stay shorter. Well, if you have 5 people on the lease and let's say 2 graduate and they want to come off the lease, those 3 other people are now 100% responsible for the lease, but now they can get guests, roommates, or occupants. And that continues until the last person on the lease is the only person on the lease. But now you have other occupants or guests. And for however many years, you're only raising the rent by the guideline. Where what landlords want to do is that as a tenant leaves, they want to raise it to what market value is. So if you do individual leases, as one person leaves, you're now doing a new lease for a new person at the new rate, not at the previous rate. Now, this is where I was getting to. Is there's some areas in the GTA that won't allow that because they'll say that that's a rooming house. So you would need to check with the bylaws of that particular city to see what their bylaws are, because it just happens to be, I did talk to a lady about this that has a student housing in around a university, and I that's what we talked about. She says that's what I wanted to do, but the city wouldn't allow it. But that to me would be the better way, because as a tenant leaves, you get a new tenant, new rate, and then the lease just new leases every time that you get a new student.
Yeah, we've helped a couple of landlords with student housings, and that's exactly what we did. We had 5 rooms, and we labeled them A, B, C, D, E. So that tenant Bob was staying in 123 Main Street, room A, and Sean was in 123 Main Street, room B. That way, the rest of the area is common areas.
Right.
Now, I hope I'm correct about this, but anyways, common areas, a landlord does not need to give 24 hours permission to check in on, correct? Where they do have to for their private rooms then.
That's correct. So on the common areas, you don't have to. Now the argument is that, well, if it's a common area, can you put a camera? And that's where I don't feel comfortable. Like if you like, let's say a kitchen is a common area, it's not right to have a camera in the kitchen. And the only reason why I say that is because, look, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I'm not fully dressed, right? And if you have females there, or even if it's not females, anyone, it's not right that you have cameras in these so-called common areas.
No, never any cameras inside the house, always outside. But
Right.
the landlord wanted to know, just for their own purposes, they live by students, and I don't know. But anyways, that's what I said. It's common areas. You don't need to do it, but you do need to give the 24 hours to.
Yeah, you still need to give the 24 hours notice. You still need to post it or get permission to come by the property.
Yeah. One of the reason that came up, and we can talk about it now, it wasn't legal at the time, but it is now legal marijuana. There was a bong in the living room and in the garage, and that was what the landlord was really trying to deter
But
or
they're
whatever.
students. They're students. And now it's perfectly legal, so
Yeah,
whatever.
can't do anything now. But then he was, it was a legal activity and blah blah blah, and so that's why he
Okay,
was.
but in all fairness, if you're going to rent out to students, you have to understand there's going to be some things that are going to be going on that are not going to go on. Like if you're doing it because it's more lucrative, then you have to know that there's more risk.
That's exactly what I always said. I said it's more headache, but it's more money. They got to deal with more turnover, right? Students come and go. You're always having to fill a room. My little brother, I shouldn't call him little, he's taller than me. My younger brother is still out in Windsor, and he lives in a duplex where we rent out the upstairs to three different students, and he stays downstairs in the basement. And the three units upstairs are always, one's empty because someone's coming in or something's going out, and it's a lot. It's a lot. But again, you're charging by room at a big price. Like even in Windsor now, there's $600 a room just to have a bedroom.
That's expensive for Windsor.
Yeah, right. Like that's what's going on. So it's anyways. Student rentals are what they are, right? Everybody has their own preference to what their investment strategy is. Um, like I said, more money, sure, but way more headache. And I think as landlords, we want it to be as passive as possible. You want the investment to continue, and the long-term hold strategy. If we get great tenants in place that are needing a nice home, is a great way to do it. You can leverage it and do some other stuff with it as long as the time continues. Um, I think that's been a really good conversation today. Unless Rob, there's anything else that we want to hit off
No,
on this
I
topic.
think we covered everything that we need to cover.
Yeah. So, folks, simple story is it doesn't matter who your tenant wants living in the property with you, as long as it doesn't affect the bylaw. That's really what it is. Once your tenants are on paper, they are in, right? So it is now their home, and um, you're going to have an income property. That's the way to think of it as a landlord. You don't need to know everything that's going on, just as long as everything's still going properly, with rent being paid and things not being disturbed for everybody else around them. We'll leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us this time. We'll catch you again for another episode where we're out there trying to make sure that Ontario landlords understand and know everything that's going on, because we don't want any misinformation or incomplete information circling around. So here we are. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Please remember, while we are professionals, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The advice shared may not apply to your unique situation. Always seek personalized advice from a qualified professional before making any investment decisions.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're finding it informative and useful, make sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend so that we can keep getting the information out there to Ontario landlords. And keep on joining us. We'll see you next time.